Welcome to the Deep Dive. You know those sources you've been meaning to read? Well, we read them, and today we're extracting all the good stuff from an analysis of the screenplay for American Beauty.
Ooh, American Beauty. That's a good one.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's a film that a lot of people have thoughts and feelings about. So, have you seen American Beauty?
Oh, I have, yeah. Many times, actually. It's a classic.
It is, and it's one of those films that stays with you long after the credits roll, you know? And today, we're going to go beyond your typical movie review.
Okay, so we're not just talking about, like, the plot or the acting.
Exactly. We're going to be diving deep into the themes, the symbolism, the characters, all that good stuff that makes this film tick on a deeper level.
Sounds fascinating. I'm in.
Okay, so to start, I'm curious. What do you think is one of the things that makes American Beauty so compelling and thought-provoking?
Well, for me, it's how the film takes this seemingly ordinary setting, a typical American suburb, and uses it to expose what's lurking beneath the surface of this perfect life.
Right. You have the white picket fences, the manicured lawns, but the film is saying, hey, there's something darker and more complicated going on here.
Exactly. The screenplay is so masterful at creating this contrast between outward appearances and what's going on inside the characters' minds.
And it's not just hinted at, it's right there from the opening scene, right?
Mhm.
Take Lester Burnham, for example. He's got the house, the family, a decent job, but he's completely miserable.
Utterly miserable. It's as if he's just going through the motion, like he's waking up from this dream and realizing the life he's built isn't what he actually wanted at all.
Yeah. It's like he's bought into this idea of the American dream, but it's left him feeling empty and unfulfilled. Do you think that's something a lot of people can relate to, even today?
Oh, absolutely. I think that feeling of being trapped by societal expectations, even if you've achieved what you thought you wanted, is something that resonates with people across generations.
Totally. And Lester's journey throughout the film becomes this, well, kind of desperate attempt to break free from that mold.
But the way he goes about it, well, let's just say his methods are questionable at best.
Oh, definitely questionable. His infatuation with Angela, his teenage daughter's friend, yikes.
Yeah, that's a whole other layer of complexity we can unpack later.
Yeah.
But at its core, I think Lester's discontent and his yearning for something more, for a sense of freedom and vitality, is something that a lot of people can connect with.
Definitely. Have you ever felt that pressure to conform to meet certain expectations, even if it means sacrificing your own happiness or your true self?
Oh, all the time. It's so easy to get caught up in what you should be doing or who you should be, especially in a society that's constantly telling you what success and happiness look like.
Right. And American Beauty really forces us to confront those pressures and to ask ourselves, am I living a life that's true to myself, or am I just going through the motions?
Which brings us to a major theme that runs throughout the film: repression and liberation.
Ooh, okay, tell me more about that.
Well, it's not just Lester, but so many of the characters in American Beauty are repressing their true selves, their desires, their frustrations. They're all playing roles, wearing masks, and it's slowly eating away at them.
Yeah, we see that with Lester's wife, Carolyn, right? She's so fixated on maintaining this image of success and perfection, but it's clearly taking a toll on her emotionally.
Absolutely. She's like this tightly wound spring, always striving to control every aspect of her life and her image.
And then there's Jane, their daughter, who's trying to navigate the minefield of adolescence while feeling completely unseen and misunderstood by her parents.
She's like this observer, this outsider looking in on her own family, and you really feel for her.
Yeah, she's searching for her own sense of identity and belonging amidst all this dysfunction.
It's fascinating how the film portrays these different forms of repression. For Carolyn, it's about outward appearances and achieving this narrow definition of the successful woman.
But it's all surface level, right?
Yeah, totally. And for Jane, it's about those pressures of adolescence, feeling like an outsider, not fitting in, you know?
It's invisible.
Yes. And then for Lester, it's about breaking free from this monotonous, soul-crushing existence he feels trapped in.
Okay, so we have all these characters who are repressing their true selves in different ways. But then we have Ricky Fitz, the neighbor. He's kind of a wild card, right? He sees beauty in things like a plastic bag dancing in the wind.
Oh, Ricky. He's such a fascinating character. He's the one who seems to really see things, who finds beauty in the mundane, who doesn't buy into those superficial values that everyone else seems so obsessed with.
And it's such a stark contrast, right? He's juxtaposed against characters like Angela, who represent this more conventional idea of beauty and desirability.
Exactly. Ricky's ability to see the beauty in the ordinary highlights how easily we can become blind to the simple things, the small moments, the things that truly matter when we're caught up in chasing these illusions.
Oh, illusions. I like that. It ties into another major theme of the film, perception versus reality.
Yeah. What we see on the surface isn't always the whole story.
So the film is challenging us to look beyond those surface appearances, to question our assumptions, and to consider that maybe, just maybe, there's more to the story than meets the eye.
Precisely. And the film uses voyeurism really cleverly to emphasize this. Remember how characters are constantly observing each other, peeking into each other's lives?
Like through windows and doorways.
Great.
Yeah. It creates this sense of unease, like we're intruding on something private.
Exactly. And it makes us question our own perceptions. Are we getting the full story, or are we just seeing snippets, fragmented moments, filtered through our own biases and assumptions?
It's like the film is saying, hey, pay attention.
Yeah.
Things aren't always what they seem.
And that's such a powerful message, especially in a world where we're constantly bombarded with images and information.
It makes you think about how quick we are to judge people based on appearances or to project a certain image of ourselves without really being authentic.
It's so easy to get caught up in trying to fit in or live up to some ideal that's not even real.
American Beauty forces us to confront those tendencies and to ask ourselves some tough questions about who we are and what we truly value.
It's a film that makes you think about your own life, your own choices, and your own perceptions of the world, and that's what makes it so powerful.
Okay, so we've got this tension between appearances and reality, characters struggling with repression, and the desire for liberation. And then there's the whole issue of sexuality and desire, which is a pretty central element to the film.
Yes, definitely. And it's not always presented in the most comfortable light, especially when it comes to Lester's infatuation with Angela.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, it's obviously inappropriate given the age difference, and it can be quite uncomfortable to watch at times.
It definitely raises some ethical questions, but I think it's important to look at it within the context of the film's overall themes, particularly this idea of desire and disillusionment.
So it's not just about a midlife crisis, as some people might simplify it.
No, it's more nuanced than that. I think Lester's infatuation with Angela represents this deeper yearning for something he feels he's lost: youth, vitality, a sense of possibility.
Okay, so he's projecting a lot onto Angela, maybe trying to recapture a time in his life when he felt truly alive.
Right. And it's important to remember that the film doesn't present his actions as morally justifiable. It allows us to witness them, to feel uncomfortable, and to grapple with the complexities of desire and the ways in which it can manifest in unhealthy ways.
And it's not just about Lester, right? The film also explores Angela's character and her own insecurities.
Yes. She initially comes across as this confident, sexually liberated girl, but as the film progresses, we see that her bravado is a mask for her own deep-seated insecurities and vulnerabilities.
It's like everyone's putting on a show, trying to project an image that's not quite aligned with their true selves.
Exactly. And that ties back to the theme of perception versus reality. We're constantly bombarded with these curated images of what we should be, what we should look like, how we should behave. But the film challenges us to question those expectations and to embrace our authentic selves.
It's a powerful message that's as relevant today as it was when the film was released.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've touched on some pretty heavy themes here: repression, liberation, desire, perception versus reality, and we've only just scratched the surface.
We've got a lot more to unpack.
Exactly. We'll delve deeper into the complexities of the Burnham family, explore that rose imagery, and really dig into the film's social commentary in our next segment. Stay tuned. Okay, so we left off talking about all these complex themes: repression, liberation, desire, perception versus reality. Phew, it's a lot.
Yeah, American Beauty really packs it all in.
It does, and it does it all so well. But one thing I keep coming back to is this critique of the American dream, how it sets up these expectations that can actually lead to unhappiness and disillusionment.
Absolutely. It's like the film is saying, hey, be careful what you wish for, because achieving the dream might not actually bring you the fulfillment you're seeking.
Right. But how does the film actually show us that? I mean, it's one thing to talk about the themes, but how do we see this critique play out visually through the characters and their actions?
Well, the film is full of these little moments, these visual cues that subtly but powerfully reinforce that critique. Take Carolyn, for instance. Remember that scene where she's obsessively cleaning and staging her house for a real estate
Oh,
showing?
yeah, she's like scrubbing the countertops as if her life depends on it.
Exactly. And she's chanting this mantra, I will sell this house. I will sell this house. It's almost like a religious ritual, and it reveals how much she's tied her own self-worth to this idea of material success and outward appearances.
Like, if she can just create this perfect image, then everything will be okay.
Right. But the film is subtly suggesting that beneath all that striving, there's a deep sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction. She's chasing after something that's ultimately hollow.
And that's not just Carolyn, right? Lester's stuck in this soul-crushing job, surrounded by corporate jargon and empty motivational posters.
Oh, totally. It's a visual representation of how the American dream can track you in a cycle of working and consuming, leaving you feeling completely disconnected from your own life.
And then there's the red convertible.
Ah, yes, the ultimate symbol of a midlife crisis.
It's like he's trying to buy his youth back, but it's also this empty gesture, this attempt to fill a void with a material possession.
Exactly. It's the film's way of saying, hey, you can't just buy your way out of your problems or recapture your youth with a fancy car. It highlights the limitations of consumerism and this idea that happiness can be found in external things.
So it's not just about what we buy, but also why we buy it, right? What are the underlying motivations and desires driving those choices?
Precisely. Are we buying things because they genuinely bring us joy or fulfill a real need? Or are we buying them to impress others, to conform to societal expectations, or to mask some deeper insecurity?
It makes me think about all the stuff we accumulate in our lives, all the things we think we need to be happy. But American Beauty is suggesting that maybe true happiness comes from something else entirely.
Right. And this is where Ricky Fitz comes in. He's the character who challenges all those materialistic values and societal expectations. He's content with finding beauty in the simple things, the things that most people overlook.
Yeah, like that plastic bag dancing in the wind. It's
Yeah.
such a simple image, but it's so powerful. It's like he's seeing the world through a completely different lens, one that's not clouded by those consumerist desires.
Exactly. And that scene is such a brilliant contrast to the scenes with Carolyn meticulously arranging flowers or Lester obsessing over his new car. It highlights the difference between a genuine appreciation for beauty and a more superficial, acquisitive kind of desire.
It's like the film is asking us to reevaluate our own definition of beauty and happiness. What do we truly value? What brings us joy? And are we chasing after the right things?
And those are tough questions to answer, especially in a world that's constantly bombarding us with messages about what we should want and how we should live.
Okay, so the film critiques this consumerist aspect of the American dream, but it's not just about material possessions, right? There's also this theme of conformity, this pressure to follow a certain path and fit into a certain mold.
Absolutely. The film explores how those societal expectations can stifle individuality and lead to a sense of alienation and emptiness. Think about Lester's job, for example. It represents this stifling corporate culture that values conformity and obedience over creativity and authenticity.
He's literally just a cog in the machine, and he's miserable because of it.
And his attempts to break free from that, like quitting his job and rebelling against his boss, are met with resistance and even ridicule.
Yeah, it's like society wants to keep you in his place,
Yeah.
to maintain the status quo, even if it means crushing his spirit.
Exactly. And that theme of conformity extends to other characters as well. Think about Carolyn and her obsession with maintaining this image of the perfect wife and mother.
Right, she's so focused on keeping up with the Joneses, projecting this image of success and happiness, but it's all a facade.
And it's ultimately unsustainable. The film suggests that trying to live up to these impossible standards can lead to a breakdown, both emotionally and psychologically.
Okay, so we've talked about consumerism and conformity, but I want to come back to this idea of beauty. American Beauty, despite its title, doesn't shy away from portraying the ugliness and darkness that exist beneath the surface of suburban life.
Oh, absolutely. The film is full of moments of tension, violence, and despair, and it doesn't offer any easy answers or simple resolutions.
And that's partly what makes it so compelling. It's not just a feel-good movie about finding yourself, it's a raw and honest exploration of the human condition, with all its complexities and contradictions.
Right, and the film's use of nonlinear storytelling really heightens that sense of unease and foreboding. We know from the beginning that Lester is going to die within a year, which casts a shadow over everything we see.
It's like we're watching his life unfold with this impending sense of doom. And it makes us question the choices he makes, the paths he takes, and ultimately, the meaning of it all.
It adds a layer of complexity and ambiguity that keeps you on the edge of your seat, wondering how it's all going to end.
And speaking of endings, we can't talk about American Beauty without addressing the ending.
Oh yes, the ending. It's a scene that has sparked so much discussion and interpretation over the years.
It's so powerful and so ambiguous. Some people see it as a moment of peace and acceptance, while others interpret it as a moment of regret and missed opportunities. What's your take on it?
I think that's the brilliance of the film. It doesn't offer a definitive answer. It leaves it up to the viewer to decide how they want to interpret those final moments.
And that's what makes it so thought-provoking. It's a film that stays with you long after you've seen it, prompting you to reflect on your own life, your own choices, and your own mortality.
It's a reminder that life is precious, that time is fleeting, and that we should make the most of every moment.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here, and I feel like we're just getting started.
There's so much more to say about this film.
In our next segment, we'll delve into the symbolism of the roses, explore the film's cinematic techniques, and discuss its lasting legacy. Okay, so we've talked about the American dream, those thought-provoking themes, and even touched on some of the criticisms the film has faced. But now I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the legacy of American Beauty. It's a film that came out over 2 decades ago, but it still feels relevant today, you know?
It really does. It's one of those films that has really stood the test of time.
Exactly. And it's not just about the themes, which, as we've discussed, are still so relevant today. It's also about the way the film was made, the visual storytelling, the iconic imagery, the music. It all comes together to create this unforgettable cinematic experience.
Right, and all those elements, combined with the film's critical and commercial success, have definitely solidified its place in popular culture.
Absolutely. I mean, even if you haven't seen American Beauty, chances are you recognize those images. The plastic bag dancing in the wind, Angela lying on a bed of rose petals. They've become iconic, almost like visual shorthand for the film's themes and ideas.
They're so powerful and memorable, and I think part of it is because they tap into something deeper. They're not just pretty pictures. They evoke these complex emotions and ideas about beauty, desire, mortality.
Yeah, and that's what makes great cinema, right? It's not just about telling a story. It's about creating an experience that stays with you long after the credits roll.
And American Beauty definitely does that. It makes you think, it makes you feel, and it stays in your mind long after you've seen it.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those cinematic techniques that make the film so effective. One thing I love is the film's use of slow motion sequences.
Oh, yes, those slow motion shots are so powerful.
Like, remember that scene where Jane's cheerleading squad is performing and it suddenly cuts to slow motion? It's just a few seconds, but it completely shifts the mood.
Right, it transforms this ordinary scene into something almost surreal and dreamlike. And it highlights the beauty and grace of their movements, even amidst this context of competition and conformity.
Yeah, it makes you see things in a new light, to appreciate the beauty that's often hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. And those slow motion shots are often juxtaposed with more jarring or violent moments, which creates this really interesting contrast.
Like that scene where the gun goes off and it cuts to slow motion as the blood splatters.
Oh, wow. Yes, that's a powerful one. It's disturbing, but it also has this strange beauty to it.
It's almost like the film is saying, look, this is life. It's full of beauty and ugliness, joy and pain, and we can't shy away from any of it.
I think that's part of what makes the film so enduring. It doesn't offer easy answers or sugarcoat the complexities of life. It presents us with these flawed characters, these messy situations, and it invites us to grapple with them.
Okay, so we've talked about the visuals, but we can't forget the music. That score, composed by Thomas Newman, is just, yes, haunting is the perfect word for it. It's this blend of jazz, classical, and electronic elements, and it creates this atmosphere that's both beautiful and unsettling. It really adds to the emotional impact of the film.
Absolutely. It's one of those scores that really gets under your skin. It lingers in your mind long after the film is over.
Okay, so wrapping things up here, I think it's safe to say that American Beauty is a film that continues to spark conversations and inspire reflection, even all these years later.
It really is. It's a film that challenges us to look at ourselves and the world around us in a new way, to question our assumptions, and to consider the possibility that beauty and meaning can be found in the most unexpected places.
It's a reminder that life is complex and messy, but it's also full of beauty and wonder if we're willing to see it.
And that's a message that never gets old.
Absolutely. Well, dear listener, we've reached the end of our deep dive into American Beauty. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of this truly iconic film.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, keep looking for beauty, even in the mundane. It's out there, waiting to be discovered.